Alright guys, I got a good one for you today. So we've been doing some kind of down, sad things, but today is going to be a fun one. In some ways it's funny. It wasn't funny when it happened, but it's funny now since no one got hurt. Somewhere along this street was a pet store. And we're not talking cuddly kittens and puppies. No, we're talking weird. We're talking exotic pet store. Well, this pet store, it was common for things to escape. So even the week this happened, the neighbor was complaining about monkeys in her tree. There had been a huge iguana shot that had escaped and was up in a tree. Neighbors were used to kind of weird stuff coming from Mauer's pet shop. And this guy had things that, oh my gosh, should so be illegal to be selling as pets. He had penguins. Well, I'm filming today because it's in the low 80s. And that's cool. The rest of the week it's going to be in the 90s. I don't want to deal with that. So I'm filming several things today. Penguins would fry, and he had them in cages in the backyard, basically. Just horrible. But he had exotic fish and obviously iguanas, and I don't know if he had big cats and stuff like that, but he definitely had smaller, and he liked snakes. And so there was this kid who would catch snakes for him, and he would trade Mauer the snakes he caught for other things. So this particular week, it is August. This boy has traded the snakes he caught for a tropical fish. Well, think of the dead parrot sketch on Monty Python. He gets his fish home and it dies that night. So he goes in the next day and says, I want to return this fish. It died. And whoever he talked to, I don't know if it was Mauer himself or an employee, but they basically told the kid to beat it. This kid was very upset by this. No. So he goes around back and he sees a crate of snakes. And he's like, well, you're not going to give me my money back? Then I'm going to take back the snakes I caught for you. And so he knocks these crates over and he lets those snakes loose. He has no idea what he let loose. Let me show you where they were terrorizing people. This is the approximate location of Mauer's pet shop. I am on St. Louis Street, which in 1953, when this occurred, would have been Route 66. This is not the building, but it is similar. The pet shop was somewhere in this block of St. Louis Street, between Kickapoo and Fremont Street. This is East Olive Street. It is right behind the location of the pet store. In 1953, this block was full of residential housing. Lots of kids lived back here. Now, this house in front of me is the only one left. The first snake to be discovered, the first official snake, according to the police department, was captured and killed at 1420 East Olive Street by the Parrish family. They had 4 small daughters, the oldest of which was only 6 years old. The family was bringing in groceries when they saw a snake in their yard, and it did not look like your normal snake. They did pin it before it stood up, and it was killed with a hoe, but it looked strange, and so they took it to Mr. Mauer and asked him about it, and he said it was just a harmless snake. There was nothing to worry about, and it certainly hadn't come from his shop. This was August 15th. On August 22nd, another snake was killed by Wesley Rose. Their neighbor across the street at 1421 East Olive, he was walking home from the bus stop and he had his little dog Sally with him. She was a bulldog, and he saw some kids laughing and pointing or really excited, and he sent Sally into some bushes by his driveway, and she flushed out a cobra. She shook it, she had it in her mouth, and she flung it. He immobilized it long enough for his neighbor to go and get a pike and kill it with that. At this point, they had a Jarrett middle school teacher look at it and determined that it was an Indian Cobra, just like the first one. Ralph Moore killed the third snake. He lived on Traffic Way at 1410 East Traffic Way. He was watering his lawn when he saw the snake slithering through the hedgerows by his yard and killed it with a hoe. A 17-year-old kid that very same day ran over a snake with his car at Traffic Way and National. Number 5, unfortunately, was killed by the Parrish family. They had killed the first one, so this poor family is finding the second one. They lived right behind the pet store, or very, very close behind it, on Olive Street. This time, their 6-year-old daughter, Lisbeth, went into the garage and saw it. She went and got her mother. Her mother went and got the neighbor, Mrs. McCoy, whose husband had killed the iguana that escaped. And so Mrs. McCoy came over. They managed to disable it. Mrs. McCoy finished it off. I'm guessing Mrs. McCoy was a pretty tough lady. Number 6, found September 9th, across the street. It was on St. Louis Street, on the other side of the street opposite the pet store. The home was lived in by the Stockton family, and they were sitting down to dinner. Mr. Stockton saw the snake come out of the bushes, and it was approaching their house from the garden. So their 4 kids are all sitting to supper. He gets up, he goes outside, he grabs a rock, and he throws it at the snake, which makes it rear up. But the rock hits it, and it gets back down on the ground, and it slithered into a crack underneath their house. Well, the whole family evacuates the house, and the police show up, and their landlord shows up, and they give the police permission to tear gas the house. So they send tear gas into the basement, trying to get the snake to come out. Meanwhile, this huge crowd has gathered outside the Stockton home to watch this drama as the police try to get this snake to come out. Mr. Stockton told the police, "Burn the house down if you have to. I am not going back into that house with that snake in there." Well, this I find that funny because it wasn't his house. They're poking at the snake with sticks under the house. The tear gas did absolutely nothing, and after 3 hours, they threw in what was called a triple chaser tear gas bomb. It did bring out the snake. A police officer shot at it 6 times with his revolver and hit it with 5 of them. Apparently, this still wasn't enough to kill a snake, and it was dispatched with a hoe finally. I mean, this poor snake, to me it was just like, it's dead. It's done. It's gone. You can stop now. But people were so terrified. There was even a story in the paper about a woman. She was a landlord, and she was checking her property to make sure it was safe. There had been something seen under the house, and so she got scared and called the police, and they came out, and it turned out to be a stick, which was incredibly embarrassing. But people were just killing any snake they found. They were remorselessly killing, which is completely understandable, but it was a really bad time to be a snake living in Springfield, Missouri in 1953. We're up to September now. This has been going on since mid-August, and we're not even, this continued well into October. The city had to look like they were doing something, and they were running out of options. The police were going on these huge searches. There were crowds of people, kind of pitchforks and torches kind of thing, combing the neighborhood looking for these snakes. They cut down some vacant lots that had grown up weeds where they could hide, so they cut all of that down, which made some neighbors feel a little bit better. They had to make every effort. They didn't know how many were out there. Meanwhile, Maurer has come up with this ridiculous story about where they might have come from. He knew as well as everybody else that they came from him, but he told this ridiculous story about a carnival guy dressed like a gypsy with the earrings and the whole stereotypical garb, who came through selling snakes. And Maurer claimed that he couldn't really remember, but he thought some might have escaped when they were loading them up in this gypsy's wagon, or just silly stuff. No one believed him. So finally, the head of the health department his name was Del Kaywood. He rented a truck. At this point, they'd found 9 snakes, I believe, and the last one was found at a plumbing company further west toward National. This location was chosen to be the start of a little experiment they were going to do. There was a man in town who was a missionary who had worked in India, and he claimed that 3 snakes had been found and captured for him with snake charmer music. Well, Maurer, when he heard about this idea that they had gotten this record from this missionary and were going to drive around town blaring this music at 3 locations in the neighborhood, Maurer basically said, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." He said, first of all, snake charmers are a bunch of bull, basically. They're fake. There's nothing to it. Snakes don't have ears. They cannot hear music. You ever see the stereotypical snake charmer playing his little flute? The cobra is responding to the snake charmer's movements himself. It cannot hear the music he's playing. That's just something for the audience. It was not going to work. They asked Maurer if he was going to have anything to do with it, and he said, absolutely not. I have a good reputation. I claim to actually know a little something about snakes, and I will have absolutely nothing to do with this. The paper basically said, well, you know, it may be a bunch of hooey, but we're going to try it anyway because we have to try anything we can. So they rented this truck. Del Wood had a record player in it and a system on the top of the truck that would broadcast the music. It basically was a big publicity stunt. They started at that plumbing business and they went to 2 other locations. They stopped behind one of the police officers' homes and played there. And then they came back around and played at the parish home where 2 had been found already, which was right behind the pet store. So they basically just kind of went around a couple block area and played it. And Maurer told them beforehand, you might catch one, but it will be an accident. It will have absolutely nothing to do with this music. And that's exactly what happened. 4 blocks away from where they were playing, another one was caught at a manufacturing company. So this was number 10. It was caught and killed by employees of that business, but the people said they couldn't hear the music playing. The snakes certainly couldn't hear it. It was just a coincidence, but Del Wood said, hey, we'll take it, even if it's indirect. You know, we'll take credit for that. Now, this snake, I guess it wasn't busted up too bad in killing it. It was taken and it was taxidermied. It was taxidermied for $20, and Del Wood said, if the city won't pay for it, I'll pay for it myself. I'll have it taxidermied. It cost $20. Taxidermist John D. Smades, who had a business on Kimbrough Street, is the taxidermist who preserved the snake, and it was given to the mayor. There's absolutely no idea where this snake is now. Maybe destroyed at this point, but it did make the rounds in town. It was in a float for a parade. The Mr. Condre, the Jarrett Middle School teacher, he took it to his home in Kansas. He borrowed it, showed it to people in his hometown, because he had pretty much, every time they would find one, they would take it to him for him to look at and identify. But no idea where it is now. But it sounds like a lot of people were borrowing it to use it. It was in the homecoming parade. So, you know, any one of these incidents, if they continue to do that, it could have been lost or stolen, or who knows what could have happened to it just in a few years afterwards. Or maybe the mayor at that time's family still has it. Who knows? In the end, they found 12. Officially, the police recorded 10 found. But there are a couple, probably in the beginning, that the police were never shown. They were taken to Maurer. He kept it out of the papers, away from the police. It ended up being 12 officially at the end. The final one was caught alive. They managed to pin it down. They put their foot on its head, which may have actually injured it, because it was reported after they got it in a jar, and the Dickerson Park Zoo took it, and it lived there until late December, when it passed away of just normal causes. But the paper reported that it probably had been injured in the course of being captured because it could no longer raise up as high as it needed to. But it's sad because the paper said that the enclosure or the cage or whatever it was living in was damaged very badly by people kicking it. So, you know, the poor thing probably would have been better off if it had just been killed from the start, because it sounds like people just tormented it. But if there were any others that survived, the cold weather as it got into late October, early November would have killed any that might have still been alive. Springfield became just talk of the international news. The mayor went to some meeting of heads of mayors of big cities, and the mayor of London said, "Oh, you're the mayor of Springfield, Missouri, where all those snakes are?" At some press conference, Eisenhower mistakenly called Springfield the capital of Missouri, probably because the name of the city was in his head from all of this snake stuff going around. Life magazine came and did a piece on the Cobras getting out, and I think in a lot of ways, from the tone of a lot of the newspaper articles about it, I think city officials kind of liked it to a certain extent. It got the city so much attention around the world, and people knew where Springfield was and all kinds of things about it that no one had ever known before or even paid attention to. Businesses were using it in their advertisements. Some of them were pretty funny. "Oh, we don't have any snakes here, but we got some deals for you." The city seal had a snake added to it after this. There is a local brewery here, Mother's Brewery, that makes a beer called Cobra Scare as a nod to that event. It's pretty good. I'm not a big beer drinker, but it's pretty good. In the 1980s, the young man responsible for all of this, he had lived his whole life in absolute fear. Obviously, he knew it was him. He did not tell a soul until 30 years later when he finally admitted, I was 14, this is what happened, I got mad, I let these snakes go, I didn't know what they were. He was so terrified he would go to jail, and he only told his story after some attorneys convinced him that he would not. And so he finally ended that mystery of where the snakes came from. Rio Mauer was dead by then, so he never knew the revenge that young man got on him. After the second snake was found, Mauer was ordered to get snakes out of Springfield. So he took them to another location, and that is where they remained. He still sold snakes in Greene County. He had something like 54 of these Indian Cobras. He paid $30 a piece for them. He had to get rid of them last minute, so he lost a whole lot of money on that. He got back about $17 a snake. But holy cow, why was it legal to give things like this as pets? I just can't even fathom it. I hope it's not still legal now, but gosh, who knows with all the Tiger King and people who have big cats and things that can kill you as pets. It's probably legal still to have a cobra. I hope you guys have enjoyed this story. It's pretty funny, but I cannot imagine the terror, being afraid to sit in your own yard, to go outside and play for like 3 months, to have fear walking to the bus, or just to go anywhere in your own neighborhood, to go see your neighbor. I don't have a terrible fear of snakes, but if I know they could kill me and they're not supposed to be here, I would be scared of that. I would be very, very scared of that. So, everyone take care. Watch out for snakes in your yard. Make sure they're not cobras. Have a good one. I will see you guys on our next adventure.